My stepchildren remember I exist when they're left out of my inheritance, turning into entitled creatures, but they're even worse when their father cuts them out of his. When I married my husband, I had no illusion that integrating into his life would be easy. He had 3 adult children from his previous marriage, all in their 20s when we started getting serious. I knew they would always have a close bond with their mother, and I was fine with that because I wasn't there to replace her. What I didn't expect was the wall of ice they would build around themselves, nor how determined they would be to keep me out of it. My plan was always to maintain a good relationship because they were in their father's life, and we would all have to coexist. The first year I tried. I invited them to lunch, sent them messages on holidays, and bought gifts that showed I paid attention to what they liked instead of just buying expensive things. I never asked them to call me anything special, but they were important to my husband, so I made the effort. All I wanted was something resembling mutual respect. Instead, I received indifference and half-hearted thanks when they bothered. At family gatherings, they'd greet everyone warmly and then nod in my direction as if I were the neighbor's cousin who happened to be around. One Christmas when I hosted dinner myself, they barely spoke. I remember at one point I passed a dish to the eldest daughter and she took it without even looking at me. My husband noticed and spoke with them, but he could never get through to them. I once told him I could live with that distance as long as they weren't openly cruel. He said he hoped they would soften with time. They knew I was kind and knew I cared about him, so it was logical to think they would change. They never did. The second year passed, then the third. We had been together for almost 5 years and nothing had changed. I stopped trying so hard a long time ago because I realized nothing would change between us. They didn't want to know me, so I stopped trying to insert myself into their lives. We settled into a tacit agreement. I didn't approach them and they didn't bother to feign politeness. They never invited me to any of their events. I found out one graduated because my husband told me. Another got a promotion and shared it with the rest of the family, including my husband, but they left me out of the group message. I didn't even know one of them had a baby until my husband came and told me. The important thing here is that my husband and I live a very comfortable life. We've worked hard and been smart with our investments. But he comes from more modest beginnings. He has worked hard and has a good salary, but it still doesn't compare to mine, and he has always been honest about it. However, his children seem to think that by marrying me, their financial future also elevated. They never said it directly, but it was implied. It's as if they expected that once I died, my money would also be theirs because I was with their father. Until I heard something at a barbecue that stuck with me. One of them said he was glad their father had finally achieved something, and that at least it would benefit them later. Benefit whom? Them? Newsflash for my stepchildren: people, no matter who they are, should be treated with respect, even if you don't want a relationship with them. Greeting and other basic rules of courtesy are the least you can do. Don't expect to treat me poorly and then benefit from my money. That's not how the world works. When we celebrated 7 years of marriage, I had already decided how I wanted to handle my will. I come from a working-class family and years of building wealth through smart investments, real estate, and prudent financial decisions. I never had children. I knew that when I died, I wanted my money to go to causes that truly meant something to me, primarily education, but also some other charities. I didn't even do it as revenge against them because it was something I had always thought about, as I have no descendants. My husband supported the decision without hesitation. He said it was my money, my decision, and that if anything happened to me before him, he had his own money to survive. He was proud of the life he had built and didn't want to depend on my money. He also updated his will. Everything he had would go to his children as expected. But we always kept our finances separate for a reason, and this was one of them. We didn't tell the children. He didn't want to, and I thought it wasn't their business. However, my husband did tell his ex-wife for logistical reasons, so she could make her own arrangements, and she seems to have told them the part about my husband setting up his will to leave things to his children. Then one of them called him asking how much he had left for each. And when my husband answered, they realized the amount was less than they expected. They realized there was none of my money in that will. The eldest daughter was the first to call. She hadn't spoken to me directly in over 3 years. She clearly expected me to answer because the voicemail she left was a passive-aggressive monologue disguised as politeness. But I didn't respond because I knew the only reason they were calling was about the will, and there was nothing to say. For years I was nothing to them, so I don't know what they expected. A bag with a $sign on it as a gift. She said she had heard some things, and that if true, she was disappointed I hadn't considered speaking with them first before making such an important decision. She said that although she knew we had had our differences, she assumed I would have the decency to include them in the conversation as they were, in her words, technically my stepchildren and therefore an important part of my life because they were my husband's children. I didn't bother to respond. The next day, the youngest sent a message through my husband. She didn't even contact me directly. He read it aloud at the table with a grimace of disbelief that this was his daughter. Apparently, she felt betrayed and accused me of being vindictive towards them because I could never replace their mother's figure. My husband commented that his will could also change if this didn't stop. Then came the family WhatsApp group I had left a long time ago. They added me back. They started saying I owed them at least a chat before doing something like this and that we were going to have it right then. They wanted to have a serious, important talk with me, but only through a group message. They weren't even making the slightest effort and wanted to talk about my money. I had to leave again before they started. One night, after another flood of messages, my husband got fed up and called them one by one to have a conversation. Well, it wasn't really a conversation because for a conversation, you need two people talking. It was more of a monologue. "Stop bothering us with this. You've lost your money for being horrible to my wife. Now go cry somewhere else and don't bring your boo-boo to us. By the way, if you keep this up, you'll lose my money too. You've been warned." That was more or less what he told each of them. Then one day, one of his daughters appeared and asked if we could talk. I asked if it was about the money and she was offended. She said it wasn't just about that. She said that although she disagreed with how distant we had become, she still thought of me as someone who had been present. I reminded her that she had had over 5 years to say something like that and never did. I told her to forgive me if I now thought she sounded like a gold digger. She was even more offended, but not enough to leave because she wanted to talk. She started giving reasons that she was maturing, that she felt loyal to her mother, that she thought I was trying to occupy a place that wasn't mine. She said it as if that justified treating me like another household decoration for over 5 years, as if it explained why she never spoke to me directly unless it was through her father. And then she said it the phrase that made everything make sense. She said that perhaps since I didn't have children, I couldn't understand how difficult it was to let another person in. I tilted my head and replied that perhaps since she never tried, she wouldn't understand what it was like to be left out. Before leaving, she asked if I would reconsider. I told her no. My decision to change the will is not up for discussion. It's a completely made decision. No matter what they say, I won't leave them the money. Even less so now that they've directed more words at me than in the last 5 years. It's as if I now wanted to be a billionaire and wrote to Elon more than just a message like, "Me want money a lot, please give it to me, me want it very much." And Elon thinks, of course I'm going to give this person my money just because they wrote me a broken English message. Which is basically what they've done because in these 5 years we've been almost strangers. That's how things stand. I'm deciding what to watch on Netflix tonight, and my husband is one touch away on his phone from calling his lawyer to change his will. I also told him not to do it now because whenever they call, he spends over half an hour talking to him because they start talking about fishing and stuff, to call him another time when we're not about to watch something. Update 1. Thanks everyone for your concern about whether or not we watched something that night or if my husband stayed up talking to his lawyer until late. No, luckily we got to watch a movie and I convinced him to call the next day. Besides, I did the lawyer a favor. Who wants to receive a call from a client at night when you're resting? Who am I kidding? It's his wife I helped because the lawyer surely loves talking about these things with my husband. But yes, the next morning he called and did what he had to do, which my stepchildren don't know yet. And we're keeping it a secret so they don't get more intense because they've been just as intense even though they don't know that if we're talking about inheritance, they won't receive any, not even their fathers. The next thing I knew, the middle child, his only son, sent a proposal. My husband literally called it that. He read it aloud, and I swear I felt like we were in a ridiculous corporate meeting. The email was drafted like a presentation. It detailed suggestions on how the money could be better redistributed, including a down payment for his dream home, help with his student loans, and a fund for what he called future endeavors. The sheer audacity of his proposal made us laugh a little. I have to admit that. Imagine having the entitlement to think someone else's money belongs to you and should be given to you because he says so. He ended by saying he understood we hadn't had the best relationship, but he felt this gesture could rebuild trust. Imagine that. After ignoring me for years, scoffing at my presence at family dinners, excluding me from every group plan, now he wanted me to buy them off with a gesture. Somehow in their twisted minds, they think I should make the effort. More laughs. I was starting to like the laughs. It was something new in our relationship. I let my 8th grade self unleash her creative writing workshop skills and drafted a brief professional response. The testamentary decisions were final legal and not subject to negotiation. I used all the most bombastic language I could think of, but with a simple message, stop begging. They obviously didn't like it because it was clear I was mocking them. I knew because they started getting bold. I saw Facebook posts about greedy people without children and how sad it is when people forget where they come from. But here's the thing. Blood doesn't make a family. Decency does. Also, kindness, effort, consistency. And none of that was ever offered to me. Not when I tried, not when I waited, not when I showed patience. Again and again I sat at dinners where I was overlooked, at parties where I was ignored, and before group trips to which I wasn't even invited. My presence was always tolerated at best, resented at worst. Now all that's left is for them to call me mommy, so I'll put them back in my will. What a trio of opportunists. My husband, to his credit, stood by me throughout all of this. He gave me ideas for words to use in my letter. We know that if they find out they've not only not gotten my inheritance, but have also lost another, they'll go crazy. All that would be left is for them to lose their mother's inheritance too. But I'm very sure that won't happen. There's no way their mother would cut them out of her will. I could be wrong, but their mother is somewhat the one who has most indulged this trio of entitled youngsters. Update 2. I have a new message, but it didn't come from any of the children, not even through my husband. It came directly from their mother. Her name unexpectedly appeared in my inbox with a subject line that read, "We need to talk woman to woman." I had to open it to read what madness this woman had in mind, because with a message like that coming from her, it couldn't be good. It began with pleasantries which surprised me. She said she hoped I was well, that she had always respected me from a distance, even though we hadn't spoken much. She called our current situation unfortunate and exaggerated, and then almost casually slipped in the phrase about how she hoped I would reconsider my testamentary plans for the sake of the children's future. Luckily, she didn't have the audacity to ask me to include her too. It was just a selfless act for her children's well-being. It's clear I'm being sarcastic. So I wrote back. I told her I appreciated the tone of her message and that I was responding to her email from a distance. I wrote that the situation was indeed very unfortunate and exaggerated, but not for the reasons she thought. It was exaggerated because ever since they found out, they've done nothing but bombard me with requests to include them, and it was unfortunate only for them because they weren't going to receive anything, and that wasn't going to change. But I gave her a reason to be hopeful. I proposed an idea she might not have considered. I suggested that she create her own will and include them. Furthermore, if she didn't have much to give them, she was still a healthy person with time to work, so she could make an effort in the coming years and leave something for them. I wasn't being ironic with that. Well, maybe a little bit, but it was full of truths. I ended the email by saying I wasn't angry. I wished her the best in her quest to secure an inheritance for her children. I thought it was a very noble adventure she was embarking on and suggested some heroic names for it, such as My Entitled Children and a Hopeless Future, or I Raised Useless Children and I Am More Useless Because I Have to Beg My Ex's Wife. I didn't hear from her after that, but how silly of me to think I had given her very clear instructions and didn't hear from her because she was busy putting them into practice. Because a few days later, my husband received a message from his eldest daughter saying that her mother was very upset that I had disrespected her and that all of this could have been different if I hadn't been open enough to possibilities. It was hard to raise children with so much entitlement and not have the fabric of reality tear with so much accumulated entitlement in one place. My husband replied that there was a lot of truth that all of this could have been different, because if they had just shut their damn mouths, instead of losing just one inheritance, which was not even rightfully theirs to begin with, they wouldn't have lost two. And to be clear, and leave no doubt, he told them that when he spoke of the second, he was referring to his own as well. We had agreed not to tell them about that because otherwise their sense of entitlement could cause a chain reaction that would make half of Manhattan explode. But my husband was tired, and so was I. So it was best they knew that nothing they were doing was working and was perhaps making things worse. Now we await two possibilities. First, that they learn they won't get anything from us, and that they don't need to keep insisting because nothing good will come of it. That would be the logical path, and therefore the most probable for people with well-ordered thoughts. The second is that they think the only way out of the hole is to dig deeper. That is, they continue insisting and trying to reason with us, thinking they have something that interests us and will make us put them in our will. The reality is no, and it's the worst of the two paths, the path of defeat and the path of continuing to lose more things if they have anything left to lose. Update 3. We already know which path my stepchildren took, and it's not the hero's path. I wouldn't call this path the road to perdition, because not only is it a path that won't help them in their future, it's a path that will ruin them. But they can't say they weren't warned. They were duly warned and given much more beneficial options than this. But you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Some horses are born with low intelligence, and instead of drinking water, they start drinking molten lava. The fury of my stepchildren has been unleashed, and believe me, I've been in storms with fewer hurricane-force winds than this. It's the storm of entitlement, and it comes loaded with many me's and many you owe me's, but without any obligations whatsoever. The tempest began with a group message to my husband, a long, furious monologue from his youngest daughter accusing him of being manipulated, saying he was allowing a gold digger, which would be me apparently, to erase his lineage. It was like reading a letter from a 10th century princess who felt entitled to my family's lands and any spare slaves I might have. Perhaps my stepchildren were born in a different era, and that's why they're so misunderstood. And here we were thinking they were just spoiled and capricious when in reality, they just didn't ask to be born in an era so hostile to their pretensions. I'm ashamed of how badly I've behaved towards them. My husband responded only once, asking them never to refer to me that way again. Then came the eldest daughter. Her message was short but brutal. She accused her father of abandoning the family, of siding with someone who never truly fit in, and of allowing resentment to cloud his judgment. She said she couldn't believe her father would turn his back on them for something as trivial as a disagreement over a will. Trivial as if it were dinner tonight and we couldn't agree whether to eat meat or pasta. My inheritance or my husband's was none of their business. If they want money, go to work, you Renaissance parasites. Then came the call from his ex-wife because she's also invested in this. Maybe she's already planning how to kill me so her children receive everything and then share it with her. Yes, that must be happening. I can imagine them all dancing around a bonfire, holding hands and singing pagan songs. He answered that call on speakerphone. She started soft. That was always her strategy. The let's calm down and have an adult conversation, until you tell her no and she throws a tantrum like a child. She said she was confused, that she thought he loved his children. Good move going for the bad father angle. They teach this at the university for manipulative divorced mothers, and it's the most demanded class of the semester. She asked how he could do something so permanent without talking to them first. He was silent for a moment, and then asked her why she thought he hadn't spoken to them. He pointed out that they had become entitled gremlins, and that sticking a pencil in his eye was more pleasant than talking to them. She tried to shift the tone towards empathy, talking about how upset they were that they didn't mean it, that all of this was for the family and legacy, and that perhaps emotions had simply boiled over. But he interrupted her and said that perhaps she hadn't seen the movie. Because if you give money to entitled gremlins, they multiply. First there are 3, but then a much older entitled gremlin appears asking for money. And now is when the movie goes completely off the rails. The ex was visibly annoyed that they weren't taking her seriously, but my husband told her that's the only way to treat people with ridiculous demands. Then he made a ridiculous noise as if he were transforming and hung up. That call left us a bit shaken. We slept very poorly that night. It's one thing to see that after the usual scares these creatures ask for more and then it subsides. But knowing they exist and are close to us is terrifying. We had to check under the bed twice and were startled when a sock, God knows how long it had been under the bed, had a strange shape. We attacked it with a broomstick until we realized what it was. I won't say whose it was. Update 4. The entitled gremlins haven't been fed after midnight with material things, but I suppose they've eaten. Nor have they been wet, although their own tears must have done that. But these demonic creatures have tried to sneak into our house, and I tell you they are very slippery. One tried to do it through the window after we told them we weren't going to let them in, and that we'd call the exterminator. But they came with reinforcements with the elder gremlin. So when we saw we were being flanked because the middle son was looking for one of our bedroom windows to enter, and dialogue we called the guys in blue to do the rest. We have the first restraining order against these types of mystical creatures. It even says that if they appear at our house again, we have permission signed by the mayor to hit them on the head with a newspaper and kick them out of the house. I know I'm taking these last updates a bit lightly, but with my stepchildren and their mother, there's no other way to take it. It's true we called the police and also have a restraining order, but I wish the bit about the newspaper was true. I can joke about it because my husband is on my side, and because so far they're quite harmless. They don't even seem to do a good job of breaking into a house, because when my husband's youngest son tried to get in through the window, he ended up trapped there and we refused to help him. The police helped him and then cuffed him to take him along with the rest of his family. I hope their plan to get their own inheritance isn't to engage in criminal activities. I don't want to be negative, but I don't see a future in that. With the restraining order, it's as if we've put a salt circle around the house. Because the demons haven't called, appeared, or even smelled near here. I wonder if it also works for witches, because I know a couple, but that's for another story.